I'm Mike,
And I'm Amber. Welcome to the Covenant Chronicles,
where we tell you the truth about relationships.
giving you the tools to build the foundation you always needed. Welcome back to the Covenant Chronicles.
What's up?
Sup, dog?
Oh, man. Well, we have some stuff to talk about.
Yeah. I can't remember which one you wanted to talk about first. I think,
Healing journey while dating. I think that's a fun one.
yeah.
Because I think a lot of people struggle with this. And in all reality, it probably contributes a lot to the downfall of dating relationships. And, part of that, I mean, we've mentioned it before, right? Is the main thing comes back to disconnection, right? Like that's really the main cause. There's, all these different topics inside of relationships that can come up, finances, lack of intimacy, children, parenting, all that stuff. There's all these things that come up that people will say, oh, this led to divorce or this led to a breakup, this, that, and the other. But really, it all circles back to that lack of connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is an area that really people struggle with, and it consistently creates a divide and creates that lack of connection inside of relationships.
Yeah.
You know, we tend to hold on to things from our past, right? And when we're trying to work through this stuff and we are trying to, I guess, work through our past, what we forget about is how this projects onto our partner. And what I see more often than not, and I know this from experience because, even at the beginning of our relationship, we did this a lot, but it becomes this situation where you tend to blame the partner and you want to point a finger and say, they're either doing too much of this or they're not doing enough of that. And in reality, a lot of it comes back to and stems from simply the way that you are working through your crap. And it's a lot easier to point a finger than it is to look at yourself in the mirror and say, okay, what am I going through? What am I struggling with?
Well, I think we've seen and know some people, probably more you than anything, because you're in a men's group with a lot of men in varying stages of relationships, whether single, dating, married. So you probably actually see more of it than I do, but just knowing, like, going through it and knowing people that I know that have gone through it, like, I think it can be a hard thing in dating relationships, and it doesn't have to be necessarily, but there's a lot of people that will say, like, you need to be completely healed before you get into a relationship, or you need to have all of your stuff figured out before you go into a relationship. And I don't necessarily think that that's true. However, what I will say is that I think if you're going to have a relationship that will actually work and last, either both of you need to have been on your healing journey and now you're like, you know, have done a lot of work and come together at a place where, you're most, I don't know that you're ever fully healed, to be honest. I think it's kind of a continuous journey throughout your life, but where you know more about yourself and can work on things without it being a massive issue all the time. Or you both need to be in a place of being willing to go through that journey together, or I don't think that it will work out. And I think what often happens is people get into relationships and one person is really working on themselves and trying to figure things out and, you know, trying to create a healthy relationship, and the other person's just not there, or, you know, just isn't to that point yet in their life, just doesn't really care to be there yet. And that causes a massive disconnect in their relationship. Or it's two people who, you know, just aren't on healing journeys at all. Like they're not at that point in their life yet. And that can cause massive issues in a relationship. So, you know, when you hear like you need to be healed beforehand, I don't always think that that's true, but I do think you both need to be willing to go on that journey to get to a healthy relationship. Otherwise, I do think that a lot of times you're either going to continue in a relationship and it's just not going to ever be healthy, or you're going to end up at a point of just feeling like your relationship is never going to succeed, never going to work, and you've got to end it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And even I'd say for us, looking back, I really think when we first got into our relationship, we both were like, "Oh, yeah, we're working on ourselves." But, like, honestly, we were, but we weren't. Like, there were still parts of us that we weren't wanting to work on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or we thought we had it all figured out, and we definitely did not. And that ended up compounding over time, and we kind of got to a point in our relationship while dating where it was like, listen, either we're going to figure this out together or we're not. Like, we need to move on and be done. And I think that that probably happens a lot. You know, for us, we ended up at that point, and it took some time, but we decided that we wanted to continue healing and growing together. And, you know, I say now, 11, almost 12 months later, it was a good choice. At the time, it was really difficult to go through.
Yeah, it is one of those things, right? And I think that that's something that people, others probably struggle with, right? And we did hit a point. It was interesting that we hit a point in which we basically said, okay, we're going to figure this out or we're not. And what's interesting about it, though, is that I feel that so many relationships out there uh basically will, how would I put it? They're not willing to push through, right? And we're probably going to do another podcast on the whole, basically what should make you want to keep pushing through, right? Or like, how do you know whether you should keep pushing through or you should just let go,
Yeah.
right? And for us, it got to that point. I think it's kind of funny because, in a lot of ways, though, I don't think either of us ever were at a point where we're like, okay, I'm done here and let's figure it out or leave, right? I think that there was this polarity of there were certain points in which, I wanted to walk away and you fought for the relationship. And then there were certain points in which you wanted to walk away and I fought for the relationship. And what's really interesting about it, though, is it was never this like, hey, you have to stay. It was, look, if you really want to leave, I'll support you in that. I'll do my best to help make the transition as easy as possible. We're not going to fight over anything. We're just going to, push. But the s- real interesting part about it is by us doing that and opening the door and saying, hey, you can leave, but I'm here and I'm going to keep fighting, it created that sense of, I don't know, we could call it security, right? That drew the other back in, and created this, like, the other was actually working towards trying to correct things. Um, but that being said, a big part of that was we both continued to work on ourselves, right? And sometimes it was more, sometimes it was less, but I don't think that there was ever a time in which we completely stalled out, right? We
Mhm.
did go backwards in some aspects, right? If you break down your life and you say, okay, well, there's all these different areas. I got health, and I got finances, and I got my partner, and I got my business, and I got this and that, my parenting and data, you know, just as human nature, there's always an area that it's like, okay, man, I was worried about these other things. I kind of let this area go, right? And we've been pretty good about catching ourselves or catching each other and saying, hey, we've gotten pretty off track over here. Let's focus on this. Let's get this back to where it needs to be. Let's not let go of everything else, but we need to divert some attention and energy over to this. And I think that's helped a lot in us working through our crap, right? And really going through this journey. And what I will say and what I will encourage people is, you are correct in the sense that people will tell you you need to be completely healed. And what I will say is, I think it depends,
Mhm.
right? I mean, we're proof that that's not necessarily the case. What I will say is it can certainly be easier in some aspects,
Mhm.
right? Because there are certain things that's part of that journey that I don't care how hard you work on it. And I will challenge, any relationship therapist or coach or whatever to this fact is that there are certain specific things that until you are in a live action scenario, you cannot work on them,
Yeah, for sure.
right? And it's like this. The best way I can describe it, and for anybody that's military, they're going to relate to this a lot. You can shoot paper targets all day long, but until you're overseas in an active war zone, you don't know how you're going to react,
Yeah.
right? Uh, y- we've dealt with, the civilian side of that a lot, where we've known a lot of people, and I had this conversation with people a lot, right? Of like, everybody, where we live, everybody up here concealed carries, right? Everybody has, a concealed carry weapon of some sort. And I make this point all the time is that that's great and all. And having tools that you don't need is much better than having a need and not having the tool.
Mhm.
However, until you're put into a situation where you actually have to use it, you don't know how you're going to react. 95, 99% of people, statistically, I would have to look up the exact statistic, but I know it's 95% or better, actually freeze in those scenarios. And so when it comes to relationships, it's the same thing, right? There are certain things that, you know, you can work on yourself and you can work on your understanding. But if you were in, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20 years of toxic, not being able to communicate, arguments, blown out of proportion, craziness, and the more, I guess, extreme those are, I would almost say or argue that the harder it will be to overcome those.
Mhm.
But, you go into those scenarios from your past, and you can work on yourself all you want. But the first time you get into an argument with, a new partner, you can quote unquote be completely healed because you worked on yourself for years. And all of a sudden you go and you get into the first argument, and they say one word that you heard a whole bunch in your previous relationship, and it can send you sideways. And so, what I will say is there are aspects, right? There are things that if you don't heal them completely before you jump into another relationship, they will bleed onto your partner and
Mhm.
they will leave scars in that relation in your current relationship or in your future relationship,
Yeah.
right? But there are also things that you cannot heal without going through it with a partner, right?
Mhm.
And so what I will say is that this is much like many other, you know, situations nowadays. There's so much information online, right? There's so much, and it's this and that, and you don't know what to, right?
Mhm.
And everything sounds great and everything sounds like it would work. And depending on what you're focused on, one strategy for something will sound better than the other. But what I will tell you is when it comes to relationships, our experience and my experience has been that it takes a certain level of stuff that needs to be healed before the next relationship, but you cannot heal everything
Yeah.
until you get into a relationship. And having a partner that understands you and understands why you do the things that you do. I mean, that's, um, something that I think you and I have really been diligent on and really been there for each other in a lot of ways is that we understand or we have a curiosity about understanding the other person's behavior,
Mhm.
right? It's not just, well, they said this and that's hurtful. And so I'm going to harden my heart towards them.
Right.
It's okay. Why did they say that? Did they actually mean to be hurtful? Right. And knowing this, right? And this is not making excuses because, we're not talking about the extremes where somebody is intentionally putting you down on a regular basis, right? That is a completely different scenario. And you probably should leave that situation.
Yeah.
But we're talking about the other partner has been reactive due to past programming and they're
Mhm.
being reactive in this situation. They said something that it probably is hurtful, and there will be a time for us to discuss that and for me to express that to them.
Yeah.
But let me take a moment to understand how they're feeling right now and why they're feeling this way.
Well, it goes even deeper than that because let's be honest, I think a lot of people get into relationships, and the culture that we live in now honestly leads to issues. And especially if you're like on your healing journey, but not really fully there, or you haven't really started yet, but you kind of want to, it ends up leading to mistakes in relationships, whether that be, eh, cheating or just things we've talked about in the past, like porn addictions or, you know, communication issue. Like there's so many different things that can happen in relationships, especially dating ones, because I feel like not that this is the way that it should be, but I feel like in our culture and society, dating is looked at like, well, it's a time for me to make mistakes and it'll be fine because, we're not super serious. We're not tied to each other, you know, and mistakes are made. And what ends up being the hard part is if people get to a point of really choosing to heal and they have made these mistakes and it's hard for their partner because they still feel hurt from those things, but the other partner not being willing to take the time to heal parts of themselves that also need to be healed in order to give and receive forgiveness. And this is a hard thing because it also is this two-sided thing where I feel like we live in a society where we just all have these walls that we put up, right? And bringing down those walls is like a freaking, like, I don't know, like, I just imagine, like, a giant trying to beat down a wall. It's, like, it's a hard task to do because we don't like to let our walls down because 'cause we've all been hurt and we don't wanna get hurt again and blah, blah, blah. The problem is that if you never allow someone on the other side of that wall to be able to give you forgiveness and grace and understanding and trust, then you're just going to keep repeating cycles that need to be broken. But
Mhm.
it's hard because I feel like so many of us have been in relationships where we've like tried to kind of let that wall down and we haven't been met with those things. And so going into a new relationship, we're like, well, no one's going to be able to give me those things. So let me just keep my wall up. Right.
Mhm.
But the problem is that you're never going to get to or have a healthy relationship if you don't ever allow your partner the possibility to give you those things.
Mhm.
Right. And, I can say in our relationship that we've both struggled with that and both had to come to a point of allowing those walls to come down to show each other things that we thought were scary. Like, I can't show you this because if I show you this, then you're going to run away.
Mhm.
You're not going to show me forgiveness. You're not going to show me love. But in doing that, because we both were trying to work towards a healthy relationship, we actually surprised each other and were like, oh, you're not going to judge me for these things. You're not going to hold these things against me forever. You're not going to hate me for this. And I think that's one of the biggest things about healing while dating is that you have to be able to do that with your partner to get to a healthy relationship. And if you can't, then you're going to continue having issues. But I say from both sides, like as the person who lets down their wall to the person who has to hear it, that person has to be willing to hear things and receive things that they might not want to hear, that they might not like, but be willing to meet it with grace and forgiveness and understanding. Because if you don't, those walls are going to come right back up and you're not going to get to that other side that you're hoping for. And your relationship is going to suffer because of it. And, I think that's a giant piece of healing inside of relationships that people need to understand. And truthfully, I think if you can't do that with your partner, that there probably does need to be some reconsideration in your relationship. And like, is this actually the person that I'm supposed to be with? Because I do think when you are with the person that you're supposed to be with, a person that's going to provide a healthy relationship with you, that that's how it'll be met.
Mhm.
And that's what you should be striving to look for in a relationship, especially in these dating stages. Because we're all going to make mistakes, but it's about being met with that understanding and forgiveness. And I don't mean like you're going to have the conversation and it's just going to go magically perfect and like you're so understanding and forgiving. Like, that's not necessarily what I mean, but it's not that you have this conversation and you sit there and freak out,
Yeah.
you know, because that's automatically going to throw that wall back up. It's just about being able to hear your partner and receive what they're saying to you, taking time to process it, and taking time for you to heal the parts of you that you need to heal in order to be that forgiveness and understanding and peace for your partner.
Hmm.
It's such a critical piece of healing inside of dating, and I do think that that's missed a lot.
Yeah, I struggle with identifying an exact mindset other than basically just saying like a selfish mindset, right?
Mhm,
Of people tend to look at it from this view of like, well, it's all about me and my feelings, right? And that's what you have to ask is, do you actually want this relationship to work? Because if you do, you have to look at it from a different lens, right? Your feelings are important, but so are your partners. And you both have been through something
mhm,
and both been through a past. And it has to be a situation in which you're willing to put in the effort to say, hey, this may not be easy. And there's going to be probably some days in which I want to give up, but start changing your internal conversation and start changing, words that you use, right?
mhm,
I mean, we got to a point, there was a point in our relationship in which we were, you know, almost throwing out the threat of leaving.
mhm,
And we had to stop ourselves and say, okay, do we actually want to leave? Or are we just saying this for a control tactic? And we stopped ourselves and said, okay, this is ridiculous. We're not going to do this anymore. And even from that, right? And to give an example of how past things can affect, I guess, the future, right? There was a few things where you and I had to clarify because we would be in an argument and, something would be said. And then it would be like, well, you said that we weren't going to say that anymore,
mhm,
right? And it would be something like, I'm done, right?
mhm,
Or I can't do this.
mhm,
And then when we would have to clarify, hey, look, hey, I get it. The past, we used to do things like that. And I understand why you're feeling this way. That's not at all what I was talking about. I'm done with this situation right now.
mhm.
We're not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
Or I don't have the mental capacity to deal with this right now. Right. And then when we started getting and working through that, then we started changing the dialogue altogether. Right. We're not going to use these negative words, can't or done or any of that.
Mhm.
Then it was, hey, let's circle back to this later,
Yeah.
right? And we started working on changing the way we communicated. And now being married, right? Like that's one rule that we've set. If the D word ever comes up, then we're doing it,
Yeah.
right? Which is not an option.
Yeah.
But,
You're
like that,
stuck with me.
yeah, that word just doesn't exist, right? Because it's not going to be a threat. It's not going to be something that we say when we're deep in our emotions. It's not going to be something that's practiced,
Mhm.
right? Because how many times do we say or do things and end up creating a self-fulfilling prophecy,
Yeah.
right? And how often is a lot of when you're working through your stuff and your past and you're trying to work through your own challenges, is this a situation where you create a self-fulfilling prophecy with your partner, right? That
Mhm.
you're dating because, oh, they're this, or this will never work, or I can't, or da 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 da,
Mhm.
right? I mean, it's crazy. And we've changed these words, right? I mean, now probably it'd be, I don't know, an hour and a half ago, hour ago, you know, uh, putting the boys to bed and, they have bunk beds. The youngest, he's about to be 7 here this week. And he had taken his blankets and his pillows out. And I told him to take his stuff up.
Mhm.
And Oh, I can't. It's too much. Yes, you can. Take it up. I can't. And he kept saying, I can't. I said, stop saying I can't. Take your stuff up. And we've kind of got this going back and forth, and he got frustrated because it was hard and it got heavy, and he got near the top. He was at the top of the bunk bed. I can't. Stop saying I can't. Keep pushing. And he jumps off and he gives up. He starts crying. And I said, okay, stand up. Stand up. Take a second. Okay, breathe. Stop crying. Stop. Don't say I can't. I don't want to hear that. Don't ever say those words to me again. I said, I want to hear I can do it. Oh, I can do it. No, say it. I can do it. I can do it. No, say it with your chest, and I tapped him on the chest and he goes, I can do it. No, no, no. Come on. I still don't believe you. Say it. Let's go. I can do it. Right. And finally, I can do it. And he got all excited. And he grabs the same stuff that he just quit, because he couldn't get it up over that top ledge. He couldn't. And he goes up and when he starts getting about halfway up, he says, like, I can't, it's heavy. I said, don't say I can't. You can do it. Say I can do it. I can do it. And he gets up there and and he's trying to get it and he's trying to get over that. No, keep pushing. Push. Let's go.
Mhm.
You can do it. And he gets up over that top and he kind of falls into his bed, and all of his stuff made it in there. And I said, see, you can do it. So stop saying I can't and don't ever use those words in my house again. And he, anyways, it was a cool experience, but it's the same thing in relationships, right?
Yeah.
So when we're saying these things, we're not going to make it. This isn't going to work.
Mhm.
I can't do this anymore. They don't understand all these negative, like you're going to create a self-fulfilling prophecy. And
Mhm.
and that's a perfect example right there with, the the littlest one, right?
Mhm.
I can't. He got to the finish line and then quit
Yeah.
because he told himself he couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. That happens a lot, I think. I th th It definitely happened in our relationship,
Mhm.
for sure, with both of us at different times, um, until we got to that mindset of, like, "No, you know, this is what we want, this is what we're doing, we're not saying that anymore." I think there's just so many varying parts of, like, healing in relationships, and I think it's hard because, there are, wanting to be on the same page, but not being on the same page about things and having to work through that, and one partner wants it and the other doesn't, and it's just, there's so many varying degrees to it. Like, I even think about, when we first started dating, um, neither of us really had a goal or wanted to be married again. Like, we came into the relationship being like, Yeah, I don't think that's for me. I don't think I wanna do the whole married thing again." Like, that's just, we had a very cryptic mindset about marriage. B but I think as we progressed in our relationship, we found that marriage is something we wanted again. But it also took us really figuring out what that meant to us, which is a huge part of your healing journey as well. We both had to figure out, what does it mean to be married? What do I want in a marriage? You know, what a huge part of it for us was honestly like f- finding our faith. And then it became more of a conversation about, like, wanting a covenant together and not just marriage,
Mhm.
because, like, we've done just marriage, and that isn't what we wanted again. That's not what we were looking for. And so, going on that journey together, yeah, I do think that that's something you can figure out before you get into a relationship, and to be honest, you probably should. But that's also something that you can figure out in a relationship together. But if you figure it out, beforehand and you get with someone who's not on the same page as you, like that might not work. Or you might be in a relationship and you decide like you want a covenant and the other person's just like, I'm good. And that's probably not going to work. So there's a lot of varying degrees of healing journeys in relationships. But I think really we're just wanting to give you like a general overview of like, can you do that inside of a relationship while you're dating? And I do think that you can. And I think it's healthy to. And even if you've been healing and he's been healing or she's been healing, whatever the case is, like, know that you're going to come into a relationship together and there's gonna be things that you have to work on,
Mhm.
no matter how healed you are. And I feel like, there's a lot of talk about that and like being secure. And I absolutely think that's great. Like, you should be secure in yourself before you come into a relationship, but you're gonna get to a point at some point where you have a disagreement about something that's going to trigger something that you were not expecting. And that's something that you're going to have to work on together. And it's the ability to be able to work on it together that's going to be the deciding factor in how your relationship goes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. That's going to be part of the journey. And I think that that's one thing that people, just really struggle with. And, it goes into a whole nother topic. We could talk about reassurance, right? And those are opportunities, right? You can look at things two different ways. You can look at things as it's not going to work because my partner has all these problems, or you can look at it as these are opportunities to build a foundation to repair the past and build the foundation,
Mhm.
right? And yes, there are, like we've talked about, right? Like if you're in an abusive relationship, whether that's mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, whatever, a truly, right? Let's throw that caveat because so many situations nowadays are just people trying to put labels on things and make excuses to justify and amplify what actually happened so they could justify the fact that they left and whatever. But obviously if it's true one of those situations, yes, leave, right? But in the vast majority of cases, you can make the choice. Are you going to basically say, this isn't going to work, make excuses? Or are you going to basically lean in and say, hey, look, these are opportunities for me to build a new foundation for me, for you, and for us, and to heal both sides,
Mhm.
right? Because if it's something you're struggling with your partner, as you navigate these, whether it's your partner or you that was the antagonizer, whether it's your partner or you that was the one that had the emotional reaction, either side of it is going to heal something from the past because in the past you've dealt with both sides,
Yeah.
right? So whether you're helping them or they're helping you through it, either way you can work on this together and build a better foundation.
Yeah, for sure.
And with that, I was thinking about this. We
Uh-huh.
always give them a weekly task.
Yeah.
And a big part of this one is change your internal conversations.
Mhm.
So, task is going to be tell yourself that you appreciate your partner And then go tell your partner that you appreciate them.
That's a good one. Whether you're dating or married, um, that should be something that's happening anyways. I think I just told you that yesterday. Yeah, we had a conversation about it because you were doing something at the table with one of the kids, and I just had a moment of like talking to God and being like, I'm really appreciative of this man and this relationship and everything. And like overwhelmed me with emotions and honestly made me cry for a minute. And I told you about it later, and I was like, I know you're gonna laugh at me, but you're like, no.
Yeah.
But I think that that's important to do. Just being grateful and appreciative and then expressing that to your partner.
Yeah, I agree. So go appreciate your partner and tell them you appreciate them. That's your task. Go do it.
Do that and have a fantastic week. Happy Thanksgiving. Go eat a bunch of turkey.
Something.
All right.
All
Bye,
right.
guys.
Thank you. See you next time.